Good morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Got it.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Riccardo Bosi, National Leader of Australia One. Today we have a unique opportunity and an extraordinary guest with us, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. He's a retired US military officer. His career includes key roles in shaping US counterterrorism strategy, dismantling insurgent networks in Afghanistan and the Iraq wars. He's had numerous combat arms, conventional and special operations, and senior intelligence assignments. He was the Director of Defense and Intelligence Agency, Senior Defense Intelligence Officer in the country, and after retirement was Donald J. Trump's US National Security Advisor. General Flynn, thank you for joining us. Good morning, or in your case, good afternoon.
Yeah, great. And good morning, Riccardo, and to everybody that listens to this from the beautiful continent of Australia. And just a little bit of background. Now, so how we came about having this conversation, I watched Riccardo, I watched you give just really what I thought was a brilliant speech, very patriotic, if you will, very forward-leaning, very visionary about the what we face, particularly in the freedom-loving world against sort of this assault against all of our rights and freedoms that we do hold dear. And I'll talk a little bit about sort of philosophically where I think we are, where I think we're heading going forward, particularly for not just for those that love and cherish freedom, but for the United States of America, and I think for all the people of Australia, because you're finding yourself in a place where we might have been, at the founding of our nation, but we are all together now. And I think it's really important that we recognize that, because the people of Australia are terrific. And I have been to Australia. I have many friends in Australia. I have fought alongside the Australian military. I have fought alongside and on behalf of the Australian Special Operations Forces, which I know you have great background in. And I do think that now is a time for us to think about where we are as nations, nation states, in this very, very dynamic period of world history. And it's very important. People cannot sit still. I use the phrase, Riccardo, here in the United States, I use the phrase local action has a national impact. And I want people to get involved in their communities like they've never been involved before. It is not, I've described a couple of governments that we are up against. In our case, I've said we were up against two governments in the United States, those that are elected and those bureaucrats that run, the sort of the machinery, and because everybody wants to know what's the deep state, right? So I do feel we are, you can use the metaphor of warfare, but we have to solve our problems civically and professionally and as citizens of great countries, right? Of the great country, great continent of Australia, and of course the great country of the United States of America. And we are joined together. We have always been joined together. You can go all the way back to that, that beautiful pin that you're wearing there, or show the red corset you've got there on your suit, because that represents sacrifice. It represents extraordinary sacrifice dating back to at least World War I, and then onward to the current day and age that we are in today. And I have been out in the Asia Pacific Theater. They now call it the Indo-Pacific Theater of Operations, and we have a lot at stake. Our nations have a lot at stake. So, from the perspective of where we are, I have broken this down into really what I describe as four wars, and they are certainly physical because of all of the COVID and the types of physical restrictions that we are being placed under. So that's just one example. We have a emotional war that we are in. We're in an emotional war because people are concerned about what is happening. We don't trust the institutions of government. And so when I speak right now, Riccardo, and for all the listeners, I'm also speaking about, how I believe what is happening in the United States is very, very similar to what is happening in Australia, because the people of Australia, the great people of Australia, believe in freedom. And we have fought for freedom, and we have fought for other others' freedoms around the world and sacrifice so much. And I know how that feels. So this emotional strain that we are being placed under, where there's a dividing or an attempt to divide those of us who feel like we have this onslaught against our rights and our privileges and our freedoms, and it's an emotional strain on all of us. It's definitely at the family level, where we have families that are at odds with each other. Certainly, friends that you probably once had, that I know that I once had. You know, we have differences of opinion, and those emotional strengths are really, they're actually being exacerbated because of, frankly, a lot of the propaganda that we're being bombarded by globally. And it's definitely globally. It's not just in each of our nations, it's globally. And then there's this intellectual war that we are in. The intellectual war is where we have to really start to work overtime to discover the truth. So when we're told one thing, we're told that, you know, and I'm going to continue to kind of harp on COVID because more and more is coming out, although maybe if we get into some questions, we can, I can address some other aspects. But the more we've learned about COVID, and then the preventative measures that are being taken, and what we are digging for, and we're discovering these doctors, these international doctors. In fact, I think that there was a international legal case presented to the World Court, I think in the last 48 hours, by a group of doctors, and that it should be interesting for everybody that's paying attention to it. And it was really on behalf of humanity to say that not only is COVID a bad thing, but the preventative measures and all of the things that they're attempting to do to us to shut down our societies and to divide us as people. You know, you're vaxxed or you're unvaxxed, right? And I mean, it's incredible. It's just incredible. So intellectually, you know, everything that I just described just in those last 30 seconds, there's an emotional and a physical component to it. But intellectually, we have to now fight for the truth. I am a product of the cancel culture. I guess a year ago now, almost a year ago now, I was canceled from every mainstream social media platform. So I couldn't get my beliefs out. I couldn't, you know, because I'm a big one for the information age, and I refer to these digital soldiers around the world who are fighting and discovering and posting and putting out the truth and giving their analysis. So we have this intellectual battle going on because there is a mainstream media body of organizations, and you have them in Australia as we have them in the United States of America. We have what we call the mainstream media, right? The big ticket, the big markets, and you all have the same problems. And then we have the social media or the tech titans who are canceling and censoring. I mean, everybody's on, you know, a lot of people are on Facebook, a lot of people are on Twitter. I'm not on Twitter any longer. And so if you post something intellectually, they immediately stamp it as saying this is probably a lie, or this is not, you know, this is not right. So there's an intellectual component to this war that we are facing. And what we have to do is we have to fight for the truth. And when you fight for the truth and you discover it, you then have to share it. And so those of us that are influencers, global influencers, that are certainly national influencers, you're one, whether you prefer to call yourself that or not, simply because you, Riccardo, have stepped up, as I like to say, you've stepped up to basically get into the lifeblood of Australia to resurrect something that I know is a great thing, and that's the nation of Australia. It is a phenomenal nation that really came out of a great history and a tough history, but also demonstrated your right, if you will, to stand on the world stage of freedom. And Australia has done that because of the sacrifice of hundreds of thousands of Australians over the many years, stepping up for others around the world. And now I think what we have to do internally is we have to step up for each other. So there's an intellectual battle, intellectual war going on. So that's physical, emotional, intellectual. But the most important thing, and I think this is really the moral component, there is a spiritual side, there is a spiritual aspect of what we are facing. I will speak for the United States because I know we have had essentially God ripped out of the fabric of one segment of our system of government. So when we talk about a two-party system, which is principally what we have in the United States of America, the Democrats and the Republicans. The Democrats back in 2012, they actually removed God from their platform. And when they did that, that was a sign that said we are no longer going to look at moral outcomes from the standpoint of a faith-based nation, which is what the United States of America was. And you can go back to the 1500s, the 1600s, all the way into the founding of our nation, where it was really based on religious, persecution and people moving to another new country, new world, to find an ability to be able to practice their faith the way that they wanted to practice it, and as well as demonstrate a real desire to have, our rights and our freedoms, and then so on and so forth. Our founders created really three conditions, and this is the spiritual component that I'm still talking about. And those conditions in our country are really based on three things. And our founders argued over this. And this is something I think for Australia as well, as you begin to rethink as an Australian, what is it and who is it that we want to be in the future? Those three principles, if you will, or values, they're the right to life, right? The most important thing, the right to liberty, and the right to the pursuit of happiness. So life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Those are tenets, if you will, of everything that we believe here in the United States of America, that every single American citizen, every single legal American citizen has. And frankly, everyone who's a freedom-loving person around the world, and anyone really, has the right to life, has the right to liberty, and has the right to pursue happiness the way that they see fit for them. And to do it in a way that doesn't feel or you feel like you're being persecuted because you are making choices about your life. And so, the whole thing, and women know this particularly, but our nation, we have this, phrase, my body, my choice, that came out of really the late 60s, early 70s. And when we talk about the first tenet that I mentioned, life. And so when we talk about these things, what COVID is doing and what our governments are doing is they're using COVID as a means to persecute those of us, those people that say, look, I know what I feel, I know what how I am, I know what my health choices are. The things that are very, very sensitive to every single person, really, as a couple. One is your health choices, and when I ask, if you were to ask me, have you had a vaccine? I would say it's none of your damn business, right? I mean, that's how I respond, and because I know how I feel. And the other part is our religious beliefs. So when you're being asked about your religious beliefs, or you're being called a conspiracy theorist because you believe in, I'm a Catholic. If you believe in some sort of Christian faith, they start to buttonhole you off to the side as though you're some right-wing conspiracy nut, right? So they are going to categorize all of us. You, Riccardo, are going to be categorized in the Australia One movement is going to be categorized. Don't let it be categorized. Those two aspects of our lives are very sensitive, and they're frankly, it's sort of none of your own business. I'm not going to sit here and preach to you about what your religious faith needs to be. I'm not going to preach to you about what your health conditions should be. You have to make those decisions as free individuals, as a free nation. And right now, from what I see, and looking at it from a distance, but paying very close attention to the global dynamics in play, which I very much do. I wouldn't have gotten to the levels that I got to including the National Security Advisor for the United States, without paying very close attention to the conditions and the criteria that is unraveling around the world. And so what I tell people, and what I tell the people of Australia, and what I tell the people of the United States of America, we now have to get involved. We now have to decide. If we have a system of government where we duly elect based on sort of a democratic principle, where one person, one vote, and it all counts equally, and the best person wins in an election, in a free and fair election, then that's good. And what we should do is we should say, okay, if you and I battle it out in a political fight, and you beat me, and it was done fairly, squarely, people liked your ideas better than my ideas, then so be it. That's the beauty of being in a free country practicing democratic principles of electing our officials. I would tell you, and this is really my stern counsel to the people of Australia, to the people of this country, and to people around the world who are in these republics, so to speak, where we elect our officials. We have elected them. There's nobody. It's not those elected officials to blame. It's us. We should blame ourselves. And this is why I say local action has a national impact. You've got to get involved in your communities. You've got to get involved in your townships. You've got to get involved in your local areas, because we can no longer accept in the system of government that we have to be dictated to in a tyrannical way, because the one enemy of freedom is tyranny. And you feel it. I know you feel it. I feel it. And many people, and all the Australians that are, there's nobody kidding themselves now, except for those people that want socialism or worse, communism to take over the DNA of the Australian fabric, or the DNA of the United States' fabric of life, right? We don't want this creeping sense of socialism to move in, yet it is. And in fact, it is, and it's been that way for a long, long time. I mean, people, there's a lot of sort of blame Trump from the media and the left for all the woes that ail us now. But this has been going on much, much longer, Riccardo. This has been going on for decades. Trump was a historic figure who, with all of his imperfections, and I used to introduce the guy as the most imperfect person you're going to vote for president of the United States, and people would applaud. They would stand up and raise hell. They would be great. They would say, yes, we don't want the perfect politician who does nothing but puts their hand out and says, give me your money. And then they go back to Canberra, or they go back to Washington, D.C., and they do just the opposite of what they promised to do for you. So it is, and I'm sort of pointing at you, but I'm pointing at the Australian people, because I point at the American people and say, it is no longer, there's no longer any excuse. We now have to take responsibility for our nations. We have to take responsibility for our futures. We have to take responsibility for our children and our grandchildren. I have 4 grandchildren, and I will tell you, and I'll stop here and maybe see if you have any questions. My father was a World War II veteran. He retired from the Army as a master sergeant, and he was also not only World War II, but he was a Korea War veteran. And he spent a long time in Europe. He spent a long time in Korea, and he fought, fascism and imperialism and communism, right? And I'm one of 9 children. I have 9 brothers and sisters, and thank God that my mother decided to not go off and get a degree somewhere, and she decided to have children. But when my parents handed off this country, the United States of America, to us as your parents who sacrificed, or your ancestors sacrificed, they handed off to us on a silver platter a beautiful country, a beautiful experiment in democracy. Slightly different systems of government, but essentially we are democracies where we love our freedoms, we cherish our freedoms. They gave it to us on a silver platter. And I will tell you that I am not going to sit still like you are not sitting still, and you're stepping into the lifeblood of Australia with the Australia One Party and the Australia One movement as the Australia One leader. And we are not about to give our countries over to our grandchildren on some dusty piece of tin and say, here, here's a country that's turning towards socialism, or worse, communism. I'm not going to do that. So I'm going to continue to get involved, and it comes with sacrifice. It comes with massive sacrifice. You'll be under attack. They'll call you all kinds of names. I just filed a major legal filing today here in a federal court, because I am under subpoena for this January 6th. I call it the insurrection crucifixion. So I just filed that today. I can let you know that today. It's on the docket. It's out there in the world of social media. I've already seen many media outlets covering it. And so it never stops. And so what we have to follow Riccardo, is we have to follow, I call it the gut feel, and women know it as women's intuition. If we start to use our head too much, although we can't stop thinking, in our brains, when we overthink sometimes, and you know this from being a soldier, when we overthink sometimes, fear then kicks in, and you start to question whether or not what you're doing is the right thing. What I want people to follow is I want them to follow their heart, follow their gut, follow their intuition, and take the harder right path in life. That means sacrifice. It doesn't mean being stupid. It just means that you're going to have to sacrifice and you're going to have to do more. For this path that we are on as freedom-loving people, in order to create a new destiny for our nations, people are going to have to change the course of their lives in many cases. And you get off the couches, get out of the boardrooms if you love your country. Get off the lines if you love your country, and get involved and help out people like you. Make this movement important. Make this movement about freedom. Make this movement about our rights, and make this movement about the future for our children and our grandchildren, because that's about as far out as I can see. And I do believe that the future is bright. I believe that it is because we have many, many more millions of people that believe like I feel like you and I believe, and we are willing to do what it takes to be able to overcome this inertia from this really global reset that is in fact occurring. There's no conspiracy theory about this. It is a conspiracy, and it's done at the highest levels of these various world institutions: the World Bank, World Health Organization, World Trade Organization. It's a manipulation of those nations that sort of the haves, and Australia was one that it was one of the haves at one time. I think that it will be a have again under great leadership, historic leadership, and new leadership, and fresh leadership that has fresh ideas. Same with the United States of America. We will move forward together, and I can guarantee you, Australia and the United States of America have moved forward together for well over 100 years. I have stood shoulder to shoulder with Australian military forces on battlefields around the world, and I would be honored to do it again, facing the enemies of our nations that try to take on or try to take away our rights and our privileges, and remove what our children, what we're trying to leave our children. But we must do all this, Riccardo, right here and now. We must do this civically. We must do this professionally. We must do this smartly, and we must do this. We must kind of in the face. We've got to fight back sometimes with strong leadership, not political rhetoric. And I think that's why you and I are connected, because, and not only did I see you from afar, I watched a great speech you gave in Sydney, but also some friends in the United States of America connected us, because these are people who believe, as I believe, in what it is that we're trying to achieve. So let me pause there, and one, thank you very much for allowing me to come on to make some comments with you and to meet like this, and we'll meet again at some point in time. But if you have any questions, let me know.
Yeah, thank you, Mike. That was fantastic, and it resonates with us. As soldiers, you and I both know there are fates worse than death. The countless and unnamed heroes of the American Revolution who trudged through the snow barefoot, bloodied, as they crossed the Delaware with Washington on Christmas Eve. You and your country have a real history of fighting for your liberty. Australia is now, if there's any good that's come out of this COVID nonsense, it's that Australians no longer trust blindly those who are in charge, and we've been a little somnambulant, let's say, for too long. But now they're stepping up, and it comes from every aspect of our community. We've got, grandmothers who used to play golf and tennis, and that was their life. And forgive the French, but one of them, who's now one of our state coordinators, said, "I haven't got time for that shit. We've got a country to save." And the Australian people are in a big way stepping up. And the great news is, and I guess we've taken, certainly I've been watching the US very closely, but despite the billions and billions of dollars and the decades and decades of lies, it is still a split decision. That's the beauty of it. This puts the lie to the statements by our adversaries that we are racist, hateful, misogynist, destructive cancer on the planet. we're all touched with divine spark. We're in the image of God. And that's what they cannot stand. They cannot stand the idea that we are all equal, no matter how tall, short, smart, dumb, white, black we are all equal on the side of God. And you and I both know that's why they attack religion generally and Christianity specifically. They must undermine that so they can kill babies at birth and old folk when they get a bit tedious and you want the family house. That's the logical conclusion. But the great news is in Oz, the best numbers I can get, we've got about 60% are on our side. 40 are well and truly committed to what we need to do. With that middle 20%, a little bit leery and coming across. So I'm very optimistic watching what's happening in the US, and we are learning a lesson today, which you learned many, many years ago. So that's very encouraging. So that trust themselves rather than the system. Now, we're going to be I've been following your revolution, your constitutional conventions, the Federalist Papers, because you've discovered all of these things yourselves a long time ago, and we are good students of your experience to make sure we implement it in a real practical sense. You said get involved, local action has national impact. Absolutely. School boards, for example, where the parents get to get in and stick a finger in the face of the teacher and the principal and say, hey, no, you don't. That's nonsense. We want this. And there are other practical steps that we're doing. But what I think and so I'm very optimistic about Australia. We're trying to bring the country to a standstill briefly, just to show our strength. So one question I would ask, the next, I guess, 6 months, and I know prognostications are dangerous and difficult, so I won't pin you to dates, but how do you see the flow of events out of the US, which will without doubt affect Australia in the next, say, 6 months? How do you see it panning out, please?
Yeah. So first of all, one of the things that I did not specifically address, but you definitely hit on it, and I think it's something that we refer to as the rule of law. One of the institutions that has clearly broken down here, and this is not one that I would be able to speak to Australia as much. You probably would be able to, certainly as you see things, but the rule of law as an institution is no longer trusted like it used to be in the United States of America. And I think that's a dangerous thing certainly in a constitutional republic and in a democracy, where if the founders taught us anything, they taught us two things. One is the act of courage in the face of just ungodly odds. And then the idea of accountability. And they held themselves accountable for what they believed in, and they would hold others accountable. So I think what we're facing in the next 6 months, and we're paying very close attention today. As an example, the White House is supposed to, Biden is supposed to give a big speech today about some additional measures that they're planning on taking here in the United States. So I think in the next 6 months, we're going to continue down this path where the left, this really a small body of this, of some bureaucrats and some elected officials are going to continue to message that we have, additional problems that have to be addressed that relate to COVID, whether it's Omicron or whatever it is. They will continue to leverage this idea that this particular, flu-like disease that we've all come to grips with is something so detrimental that we have to continue to put extraordinary measures in place. And so I think we're going to see some of that. And so that's over the next 6 months. And there's going to be very measured steps, particularly here in the United States of America, where they're going to try to take that. Additionally, on the financial side, I think that the financial side, we're at about 7% inflation rate today. I don't know what the inflation rate is in Australia, but we're about 7% inflation rate. A year ago, we were at 1%. So I think that we are going to continue to climb in terms of the inflation rate, which continues to increase the debt. And it puts a massive financial strain on regular citizens, right? Just regular old people. What most people are concerned about, Riccardo, is what's 50 feet from their door, I call it, right? What's 50 feet from your door. And that's the price of a loaf of bread, the price of a gallon of gas, or a liter of gas, or the price of some other commodity that you buy at your local store. And if you have a problem at your home, whether somebody's breaking in or whether the garage is on fire, you want You want resources to show up quickly. You want the police to show up. You want the fire department to show up 50 feet from the door. That's what most people are mostly concerned about. I think there is going to be a financial strain over the next 6 months, and we're going to see a continuation of this. And again, I don't have the data to make any analogies between the United States and Australia right now. But I would venture to say that if you have somebody to take a look at that for you, you're going to see some similarities in this financial strain, because when there is a financial strain, it causes people to fear more of what the unknown is, right? It builds a sense of fear, not necessarily just in the government. It's just in what I am able to do, how much risk I can take. If I do this, I could lose my job. If I don't do that, I could lose my job. So there's going to be an additional financial strain, I think, put on the global economy, and definitely on those nations that are leading indicators of the direction that the world is taking. And clearly the United States is at the top of that leading indicator. So I think financial strain, and I think additional COVID measures. The last thing that I think, and there's probably a couple of others, but I do believe that we are going to see when we talk about the censorship or the cancel culture that we see, I think we're going to begin to see even more movement to shut the voices that are they're really professional, they're really expert, the expert doctors, the expert legal people, experts in security issues. I think we're going to see more and more of them start to get shut down, or attempts to shut them down, because in this country, I'm part of what we call a Reawaken tour that we are on. We've gone around to 7 cities. We've got another 4 right now that are already lined up. We're trying to do as many as we can as we lead into the 2022 election. And I know right now we are under extraordinary pressure when we go into these cities, or even before we can get into them. We see the media and others in the local government who are on the left try to shut these events down. They don't even want us to have a freedom rally to talk about our rights, or to talk about the health conditions that are going on, or to talk about the free and fair elections, or to talk about how do you what's the action plan for you to get involved in your communities, because that's one of the big things that I talk about. So I think those are 3 things. I think this additional COVID restrictions and measures. I think that there's going to be a move towards more financial restraints being put on the local, just regular old people. And I think we're going to see the larger body of media and government try to shut down some of these various rallies that like if you said, look, I'm going to go on the Capitol steps of at Canberra, or I'm going to go up I've been up to the mountain up there, or you go to some other place in Sydney or some other location, and you want to hold a rally for the Australia One Party. And again, I don't know exactly what the laws are for peaceably protesting or peaceably assembling. I imagine it's pretty, in the past, it's been pretty easy to do. You show up with 1 million people, they're going to try to shut you down, and you're going to hear all kinds of noise about you. So people like you, people like me, and it's not to be stupid, but it's to be fearless. It's like my mother used to say, sticks and stones can break my bones, but names will never hurt me, right? And boy, have I had to live that one. And it's so true. It's so true. So I don't care what they call me. In fact, the more that they call me out, the more, and they know this now. So they kind of go quiet on me on certain things. But the more they call me out, the higher my stature becomes, because when people actually take a hard look at who Mike Flynn is, who General Flynn is, and you can go, people can go to generalflynn.com. I've created a website just to say, you want to know who I am? Go look at it. I've tried to post everything I've ever done on there, to include all of the legal battles I have faced. So I think for someone like yourself, and I only offer this to you and frankly to those listeners, and I hope that there's many, I hope that there's millions and millions of people from Australia, that in order to live in a free society, in order to have freedom, like we always like to say in the military, or those, I have a sign out in front of my home where I'm sitting right now, freedom isn't free. and it's never going to be free. And all people have to go do is go to any veterans cemetery, any memorial cemetery, and you can see the results of freedom and the sacrifices that freedom requires. And so now we have internal issues that we have to deal with. We have a domestic set of issues that we have to deal with. And like I say, this is our problem. This is our fault, and this is our time to get involved. So we created this because we the people, like we love to say here in the United States, right? We the people created this. We're the ones that put these people into office. We're the ones that were asleep at the switch, allowing our school boards to take over the education of our children, allowing local townships and communities to dictate to us how we're going to live, and certainly allowing our federal governments to do things that are way outside the mainstream of our constitutions. And so we created this mess. Men wrote the Constitution, and believe me, it can be taken apart by men if necessary. And so what we have to do is, and I use the word men in a general way, but I mean, we can fix this too. And we can fix it by stepping up, standing up, getting involved, and participating. No one in our countries can have the excuse, well, I don't do politics anymore. I know that you would much rather be doing something else. I know I would much rather be doing something else. All of us are now involved in the political life of our country if we want to continue to have a free nation, under God, right, indivisible, and like we like to say, with liberty and justice for all. And I think that is so important. Those words that were fought for, sacrificed for, they have meaning for both the United States of America and for the great citizens in the great country of Australia.
Mike, thank you very much. Extraordinary. It's been, look, we could listen to you all day. I know you've got a full day ahead of you. You've got a dozen more interviews to do. So we are privileged, and it's been an absolute pleasure to have you today. Thank you so much for your time. I look forward to, perhaps, if we're lucky enough in the future, to catch up again to see how things are going.
Absolutely. I'll be following you, Riccardo, very closely, because I really do believe that, there are historic figures that step up in historic times. And I do believe when I first saw you speak, I said, wow, this guy, we got to pay attention to this guy. He's got the right message, and you have the authenticity. Okay. So we've never met physically other than right now virtually, but I look for authenticity in leaders, and leaders who have humility. And I do believe that you have both of those. And honestly, I'm very serious. We need historic figures to step up right now at the levels that you are stepping up to, and in order for us to save really freedom around the world.
Thanks, Mike. Much appreciated. We'll let you go. We know you're busy. So thank you very much for your service. Thank you for what you have done, what you are doing, and what you will continue to do in the future. We look forward to catching up with you, hopefully again in a month or three. Thank you so much, Mike.